You're listening to Back to Us Radio on the Back to Us Network.
Who have I become? 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 Who? Throw tight, midnight, wait up by the lamplight like a housewife. Can't sleep, can't sing, staring at the phone, still it won't ring. Get back.
Good evening, Strong Stance listeners. I hope you are well, wherever you find yourself this month. I recently presented at the FTM Fitness Conference in Atlanta. It was 3 days of speakers, breakout sessions, and events focused on the acknowledgement, discussion, education, and celebration of transgender fitness in all its forms: physical, emotional, mental, and even financial. This was the second year for the FTM FitCon, which will soon be going through a rebranding of sorts, but we'll get to that later. For most people that have heard of FTM FitCon, they know it is the first FTM bodybuilding competition, but that event is just one aspect of the conference. In addition to the historic bodybuilding competition, there was a fashion show, morning boot camps, a wellness fair, more than 20 workshops and discussions, and a closing ceremony and reception. Among the keynote speakers were Buck Angel, Ryan Salins, Dr. Courtney Ziegler, and Tracy McDaniel, who has appeared on The Strong Stance a number of previous times. I attended the conference in a number of different capacities. Primarily, I was there as a session presenter, but I was also there as an attendee and as press. In tonight's episode of The Strong Stance, we're going to do something a little different. I'll talk a bit about my session presentation and my experiences as an attendee, but more importantly, I'll talk to a number of the attendees as well as FTM Fitness World founder and president, Neo Sanja. You won't want to miss this, so stay tuned. The session that I presented is one that I've given a couple times in previous years, and it's called Where's My Checkered Flag? Preparing for Life After Transition. And the main premise of this is that as trans people, especially very early in our transition, for those of us that are choosing to transition, oftentimes we focus so much on the finish line and that myth of the moment of transition, and we don't often focus so much or even think about what happens after that transition, this idea that there is a finish line, the end game. And, what I try to talk about in this session is there really is no finish line, that you have to kind of prepare for your life that goes beyond this and not look so much at this as an endpoint. And what often happens when we don't prepare for this life after is that when we spend all our energy and all our money and all our time and effort and all the other things that we give over to getting us to that moment, that when we've crossed past that moment, there can be somewhat of a letdown. There can be a feeling of emptiness. And where a lot of that feeling comes from is the loss of a purpose. So in this session, I talk about the ways in which we can use our time to prepare for life after someone has crossed that imaginary line, wherever that line exists for that person. I talk about building community and facing your fears and preparing for the worst but hoping for the best. And it's really all an effort to get folks to look at all the different aspects of their lives rather than having tunnel vision for just the prize of transition. And I do this not only with, a couple of ideas that I discuss, but also with some anecdotes, not only from my transition, but from other friends' transitions and people that I have known. And I hope that folks will walk away from that lecture having hopefully learned something new, and hopefully a feeling that there are great things that can help them enjoy life before, during, and after the process of transition. Because very often when we have to wait to transition, whether that's because we can't afford it or because we're waiting for a certain age or someone to be accepting or whatever the case may be, that we can find ourselves in somewhat of a depression because we feel like our life has not started yet, because we are having to wait for our real life, our life in our correct body and our correct mindset, however someone finds that in their life. We're waiting for that to start, and what often ends up happening happening is that if that's not fast enough, we can find ourselves kind of stuck in this darkness. And so by finding small ways that every day you can empower yourself to basically get to that next day, to basically say that I am actively choosing to be on this path of transition every day, it can lift you up out of that darkness, because it's not like it's never going to happen, and you can see every single day as getting you one step closer to wherever that line, or however you define that line. And honestly, it can also help you so that after, again, you don't have that letdown, that when you set a goal and you accomplish it, you set another goal, and when you meet that one, you set another goal. So it's a lecture that has kind of evolved over the last couple of years. The older that I get, the longer I have been on this path, as well as more people that I meet and more conversations that I have. And so this particular one was, I felt like it was really good. There was some good feedback. We had a multi-generational group that was in there, and so I feel like I learn as much giving it as I hope that folks learn from sitting there and hearing it, probably more so. Up next, I'll talk to some of the attendees and presenters about their experiences at this conference. While I was at FTMFitCon, I had the opportunity to sit down with a few attendees and presenters to find out, what experiences they were having at this conference, why they felt that conferences like this were important, what sessions they enjoyed the most, what they were getting out of the event. And I think that it's really important to kind of hear those answers from a multitude of people so that we can see the varied response that each person is bringing into this realm, their own biases, their own experiences, and therefore they have their own needs and their own views as to what is most important about this event. Also, in order to respect everyone's personal level of comfort when it comes to being out in a public space, I allowed the attendees and presenters to give me either their full name, just their first name, or a pseudonym if they so chose. Now, the audio that you're going to hear is not edited much. It's pretty rough, and the reason why is that the more that you start to edit someone's words, the more that you bring in the biases of the person that is editing and their own personal experiences and their own interpretations. And what I really want for our listeners to hear is each person's raw individual response to a lot of these questions. I tried very hard to be very hands-off when it came to editing so that you could get the true responses that each person had to questions or to the real conversation that we were having without much manipulation, to be quite honest, by my hand. So with that being said, here are the words of 5 folks that I sat down with on their experiences at FTMFitCon. So can you say your name for me?
Will.
Cool. And what city are you located in normally? Where do you live?
Fayetteville, North Carolina.
North Carolina. And how did you get here? Did you drive or did you fly?
I drove.
Worth the drive? What was that, like? How many hours is that?
5.5 hours. It was worth the drive. I've driven further distances, so it wasn't that bad.
Good deal. How do you identify and what pronouns do you use?
I identify as a trans man, so he, his, him.
Cool. And is this your first or your second year at FTMFitCon?
This is my first year.
Awesome. Why do you feel like conferences like these are important, either to the larger community or just trans men or just trans community in general?
I feel conferences like these are important because for a trans man like myself, from a city that doesn't have that many trans men in it, or trans people in general, it's a good way to network. It's a good way to be around like-minded individuals. It's a good way to learn about things you wouldn't otherwise learn about in these unique settings.
Cool. And what do you hope to gain from this weekend's events?
I hope to gain a larger network of trans men. That was my point of coming, that was my goal here, was to meet other trans men, network with other trans men, just be around other people that affirm my identity.
Absolutely. And then last question, if you have one picked out, what session or event have you enjoyed the most, or which session or event are you looking forward to the most?
I am looking forward to transitioning from a legal perspective. That's going to be tomorrow. And only because I have transitioned legally my name, but I'm interested to learn some other aspects of it, and I just am interested in that.
Cool. Thank you. Is there anything else you want to share?
Nope.
Cool. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
JB Fuoco.
And where do you live?
I live in Atlanta, Georgia.
Awesome. So I assume you drove here.
I did drive here.
Not a flight.
I did not fly in.
Okay. How do you identify and what pronouns do you use?
I use he, his, him. I identify as trans man, trans guy.
Cool. Is this your first year or second year at FitCon?
First year.
Cool. Why do you feel like conferences like these are important?
I think for me they're important, especially as somebody who's new to the community. I'm less than a year into my transition, so it's a good informational session. It's good to meet new people. It's good to network and kind of be able to talk to, the trans forefathers and, what's your experience and, what you can learn from other people's experiences is, I think, more valuable than what you can read in a book. Right. I also think that the healthcare world has not caught up to us yet, and so being able to learn from our peers in this community is incredibly invaluable. Mm-hmm. So that to me is why this is important.
Cool. What do you hope to gain from this weekend's events?
Hoping to meet folks and build a community. I don't have a large trans community here. I used to have one when I lived in Portland, ironically enough, years before I transitioned. But it's a very different world out there. I mean, those of us that live in the South, it's a different world. So just kind of being able to find kindred spirits, like you were saying in your session yesterday, community. Like, This is a community building thing. And again, learning, being able to learn, legal perspective stuff, body stuff, like what workout stuff, like how do you help shape your body to be more traditionally, hegemonically masculine, to whatever level is comfortable for you. Like that, to me, that's
cool. What session or event have you enjoyed the most? Or if it hasn't happened, which session or event are you looking forward to the most?
I think two of the ones I really enjoyed, one was the testosterone boosting foods, because nutrition is so important, and for a lot of things, but that just happened to be the name of the panel. Your panel was actually really great because it was like there's no end line, right? Like right. Your point was valid, and I think a lot of people get to a point, especially those of us that are early in our transition, that are like, okay, so what's the end line? Knowing that there's no end line. I mean, like, that what is end line is living, right? Like, at whatever point. And then the bottom surgery one to know, like, what options are. Like, I had not previously considered any bottom surgery. Yeah. Because I only knew of two options, and neither of them seemed attractive to me, or valuable, or cost-benefit analysis be at the right level for me. I'm looking forward to the bodybuilding thing, but that's not really my thing, but just more for interesting and validating and, seeing some trans guys be really happy with their bodies and empowering and that kind of a thing. But
kind of uplifting and affirming that there are all types of trans bodies and that there are all types of good bodies and shapes and sizes. Exactly. So is there any other thing that you'd like to share or anything else you'd like to say or anything like that?
I really am... I'd like to see this conference grow. I've never been, I've heard mixed reviews about Gender Odyssey. I know the original founder of Gender Odyssey, and when I lived on the West Coast, was peripherally in his social circle, and I know about that conference. I know about SoCo, but I've heard, again, mixed reviews about that, and so I would love to see this. This feels like a really welcoming conference of all types, because I feel like, from what I've heard from those conferences, is that they're very, old school mainstream trans.
Gotcha. For those of our listeners that don't know, when JB refers to SOCO, he is talking about the Southern Comfort Conference, which is a transgender conference